It was a rainy Tuesday morning when Daniel rushed to catch the 8:15 train to work. The sky was gray, and the streets were full of umbrellas bumping into each other. He hated mornings like this. Everything felt heavy, as if even the air was tired. Daniel worked at an insurance company. His life was simple, maybe too simple. Every day looked almost the same. Wake up, run to the train, work at the office, go home, repeat. Nothing surprising ever happened. At least that's what he thought. That morning, as Daniel stepped into the crowded train, he noticed someone unusual. A woman was sitting near the window, staring outside as if she wasn't really there. She wasn't scrolling through her phone like everyone else. She wasn't even looking at the people around her. She was just lost in thought, and something about her presence felt different. Daniel sat across from her. He didn't mean to stare, but he couldn't help it. There was something mysterious about her, like she carried a story nobody else could see. Her coat was old but elegant, her hair slightly messy, and in her hands she held a small leather notebook. At one moment, the woman turned her head and caught Daniel looking at her. Instead of frowning or looking away, she smiled softly. It was the kind of smile that felt almost secret, like she knew something he didn't. A few minutes later, she pulled a pen from her bag and began writing in the notebook. Daniel tried not to watch, but his curiosity was stronger. He wondered what she was writing about. Maybe it was work notes, maybe a grocery list, or maybe something more personal. When the train stopped at the next station, the woman closed her notebook, stood up, and walked toward the door. But just before leaving, she paused, turned back to Daniel, and whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "Not everything in your life is what it seems." Then she was gone. Daniel froze. What did she mean? Why say that to him, a complete stranger? He wanted to run after her, ask her, but the train doors closed before he could move. For the rest of the ride, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her words. His ordinary morning suddenly felt like the beginning of something he couldn't explain. For the rest of the day, Daniel couldn't concentrate at work. He kept hearing the woman's words in his head. Not everything in your life is what it seems. What could that possibly mean? Did she mistake him for someone else? Or was it just a strange joke? By the time the clock hit 6, Daniel was more tired than usual. He took the same train home, half expecting to see the mysterious woman again, but the seat near the window was empty this time. The ride felt painfully ordinary without her. When Daniel finally got home, he threw his jacket on the chair, made himself some instant noodles, and tried to distract his mind with TV. But then something caught his eye. On the floor, just near the inside pocket of his jacket, there was a small, brown leather notebook. His heart jumped. It looked exactly like the one the woman had been writing in on the train. Daniel picked it up slowly. The cover was soft and worn out, as if someone had carried it for years. He opened the first page, expecting to see a name or maybe random notes. Instead, there was a short message written neatly in black ink. To the person who finds this, nothing is an accident. Keep reading. Daniel froze. Was this really meant for him? He turned the page. Inside were several entries, written like diary pages. The first one was dated 3 months ago. Someone is following me. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but I keep seeing the same man near my apartment, near the grocery store, and even on this train. I don't know why he's watching me, but I can't shake the feeling that my life is in danger. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He read the next entry. If something happens to me, maybe someone will read this notebook. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll be able to finish what I couldn't. Daniel shut the notebook quickly, his hands shaking. This wasn't just a random diary. It was a cry for help. And somehow, it had ended up in his hands. Daniel barely slept that night. The words from the notebook kept echoing in his head. If something happens to me.
By morning, he was exhausted, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that he'd been pulled into something much bigger than himself. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee in hand, staring at the notebook. Finally, he opened it again. Most of the entries were short, but filled with fear. The woman described shadows outside her window, footsteps behind her late at night, and an unfamiliar number calling her phone over and over. Whoever she was, she truly believed someone was after her. Then, halfway through the notebook, Daniel found something different. A sketch. It was a simple drawing of a train station. His train station. Underneath, in small letters, she had written, "He always waits here, near the third bench." Daniel felt a chill. He knew exactly which bench she meant. He passed it every day on his commute. That evening, instead of heading straight home, he decided to check. His hands were sweating as he walked through the station, pretending to be just another tired commuter. And then he saw it. A man was sitting on the third bench. He wasn't reading, wasn't on his phone, just sitting, scanning the crowd. His eyes moved slowly across the platform, sharp and watchful, until, for one terrifying moment, they landed right on Daniel. Daniel quickly looked away, heart racing. The man's face was calm, but there was something cold about it, something that made his instinct scream, "This is not a coincidence." He boarded his train as fast as he could, gripping the notebook in his pocket. The woman hadn't been lying. Someone really was there. Someone really had been watching her. And now, maybe watching him too.
Daniel's train ride home felt endless. Every time the doors opened at a station, he half expected the man from the bench to step inside and sit behind him, but he didn't. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At home, he placed the notebook on the table, staring at it like it was a bomb. He knew he had two choices: ignore everything, pretend none of this ever happened, or keep reading. Of course, curiosity won. The next entries in the notebook revealed small pieces of the woman's life. She wrote about her job at a library downtown, her love of old books, and the way she often felt invisible in a city full of busy strangers. But every few pages, the fear returned. Mentions of the man, the sense of being followed, the late-night calls. And then Daniel found a name. "If I disappear, look for Claire." Daniel whispered it out loud. Claire. At last, the mysterious woman had a name. The next morning, instead of going straight to work, Daniel made a detour. He searched online for libraries near the train route and found one just 2 stops away from where he usually got off. His heart pounded as he walked up the stone steps and pushed open the heavy doors. Inside, the library smelled of dust and paper. Behind the counter sat an older woman with glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Excuse me," said Daniel nervously. "I'm looking for someone. Her name is Claire. She works here, I think." The woman frowned. "Claire? You mean Claire Thompson?" Daniel nodded quickly. The librarian sighed. "She hasn't been in for over a week. Didn't call, didn't explain. Strange girl, but reliable. This isn't like her at all." Daniel felt his stomach drop. Claire was missing, and suddenly the notebook in his jacket didn't just feel like a strange mystery. It felt like a responsibility.
Daniel left the library with a heavy weight in his chest. Claire hadn't been seen for over a week. The woman on the train, the same woman who slipped him the notebook, was gone. On the bus ride back, he kept replaying her words. Not everything in your life is what it seems. Back in his apartment, Daniel spread the notebook open on the table and flipped through the last few pages. The handwriting grew more rushed, shaky, as if she'd been writing in a hurry. One entry caught his eye. "I think I finally know who he is. I saw him near the river outside the old warehouse. I don't know why he's there, but I can't ignore it anymore. If anything happens, that's where it'll look." Daniel leaned back in his chair, heart racing. The old warehouse. Everyone in the city knew it, an abandoned building near the docks, rumored to be dangerous. Teenagers went there for dares, but otherwise people avoided it. He knew it was reckless. He knew he had no business following the path of a stranger, but he also knew that if he did nothing, the mystery would haunt him forever. The next evening, just as the sun was going down, Daniel made his way toward the docks. The streets grew quieter, lonelier the closer he got. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a giant skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows. As he approached, he noticed something. A light. Faint, flickering, coming from one of the upper floors. Someone was inside. Daniel's pulse quickened. He hid behind a stack of crates, trying to decide what to do. That's when he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching on gravel. And then a shadow moved near the warehouse door. It was the man from the bench.
Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the man from the bench. The same cold eyes. The same stillness, like a predator waiting for the right moment. The man unlocked the warehouse door and slipped inside. Daniel's mind screamed at him to leave, to run as far away as possible. But another voice inside him whispered, "If you walk away now, you'll never know the truth. And Claire, she may never be found." So, with shaky hands and a pounding heart, Daniel waited until the door closed, then crept closer. The rusted handle was still warm from the man's touch. Slowly, Daniel pulled it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside the warehouse was a cavern of shadows. The air smelled of dust, oil, and damp wood. Faint light spilled from a staircase leading up to the second floor. Daniel could hear footsteps above, steady, unhurried, as if the man wasn't afraid of being followed. Daniel climbed the stairs one at a time, careful not to make a sound. When he reached the top, he froze. There, in the middle of the room, was a table. Papers were scattered across it, along with photographs. Daniel stepped closer, his stomach twisting. The photographs were of Claire, sitting on the train, walking down the street, entering her apartment. Dozens of them. Whoever this man was, he had been watching her for months. Then Daniel noticed something else, something that made his blood run cold. Among the photographs of Claire, there were photos of him. Daniel on the train, Daniel at the office, Daniel unlocking his apartment door. His head spun. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. Somehow he was part of this too. Before he could process it, the sound of footsteps grew louder. The man was returning. Daniel looked around frantically for a place to hide, but the room was nearly empty. The only option was a dark corner behind a stack of crates. He slipped into the shadows just as the door creaked open. The man walked in, humming quietly to himself, and set something down on the table. A small, black phone. He dialed a number, waited, then spoke in a low, controlled voice. "He has the notebook." Daniel's blood turned to ice.
Daniel pressed himself against the cold wall, barely breathing. "He has the notebook." The words echoed in his head like a hammer. How did the man know? Was Claire still alive? Or had she told him before she vanished? The man listened quietly on the phone, nodding as if someone on the other side was giving instructions. Finally, he said, "Don't worry. He'll bring it to us. He doesn't have a choice." Then, he hung up. Daniel's hands were sweating so badly he almost dropped the notebook from his pocket. He realized now that this wasn't just some stalker. This was organized, planned, and somehow he had been dragged right into the center of it. The man gathered the photographs into a folder, slid it under his arm, and left the room. The sound of his footsteps faded down the stairs. Daniel waited. 10 seconds. 20. His heart pounded so loud he was afraid the man would hear it. Finally, when the silence returned, Daniel stepped out of hiding and looked at the table again. The phone was still there. For a moment, he hesitated, but then, with shaking hands, he picked it up. The screen was locked, but a single notification glowed at the top, a text preview. Unknown number. Bring the notebook tomorrow. Same train, 8:15. Daniel's blood went cold. They expected him. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Claire anymore. Whoever these people were, they knew about him. They had been watching him, and now they wanted him involved. Daniel stuffed the phone back on the table and hurried out of the warehouse, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Once outside, he gulped in the night air, trying to calm the storm inside his chest. But there was no calming it. Tomorrow, everything would change.
The next morning, Daniel felt like he was walking into a trap. His alarm went off at 6:30, but he had barely slept a minute. The notebook sat on his kitchen table, its leather cover almost daring him to open it again. Same train, 8:15. He thought about ignoring it, just staying home, pretending none of this existed, but deep down he knew running wouldn't solve anything. Whoever they were, they already knew who he was, where he lived, even where he worked. By 7:50, Daniel was already at the station. The platform was crowded, filled with the usual blur of commuters, but he felt painfully exposed. Every stranger's glance felt sharper, every whisper suspicious. When the train arrived, Daniel stepped inside, clutching the notebook tightly in his jacket. His eyes darted across the carriage, searching for the man. And then he saw him. The same figure from the bench, calm, composed, sitting near the middle of the carriage as if he'd been waiting all along. But this time, he wasn't alone. Next to him sat another man, younger, sharper, with a scar running down his jaw. He gave Daniel a brief, calculating look before leaning in to whisper something to the older man. Daniel's pulse raced. He wanted to run, but the doors had already closed. He was trapped. The train began to move. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then the younger man stood up, walked through the aisle casually, and sat down directly across from Daniel. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were cold. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the train. "I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you." Daniel froze. Every instinct screamed at him to deny it, to play dumb. But before he could respond, the man leaned closer and whispered, "Claire trusted you. That was her mistake." Daniel's heart stopped. Claire. They knew about her. They knew she had given him the notebook. And if they knew that, then maybe Claire was still alive.
Daniel gripped the notebook inside his jacket so tightly his knuckles turned white. The younger man's calm smile didn't reach his eyes. Across the carriage, the older man watched, silent but sharp, like a hawk waiting for its prey to make a mistake. Daniel swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, his voice shaking. The younger man chuckled softly, as if amused by the attempt. He leaned even closer, his breath hot against Daniel's ear. "Don't play games. She gave it to you, and now we need it back." Daniel's mind raced. If he handed over the notebook, maybe they'd leave him alone. Maybe this nightmare would finally end. But what about Claire? If she was alive, the notebook might be the only chance of saving her. The train jolted suddenly as it stopped at the next station. The doors slid open, and for a split second, Daniel considered bolting out, disappearing into the crowd. But the older man's gaze pinned him in place. He knew if he tried to run, they'd follow, and maybe worse. Daniel forced himself to think, what would Claire want me to do? Then he remembered one of the last lines in the notebook. If this falls into the wrong hands, everything is lost. His chest tightened. He couldn't give it to them. Not now, not like this. The younger man's smile faded.
His voice grew sharper. Last chance? The notebook. Now. Daniel's heart hammered so loud he could barely hear himself when he whispered back, "No." For a moment, silence filled the air. The younger man's jaw tightened. The older man stood slowly, his shadow falling across the aisle. And that's when Daniel realized he had just made himself their enemy.
The train roared through the tunnel, the dim lights flickering overhead. Daniel's pulse hammered as the older man stepped closer, his face unreadable. The younger one leaned back in his seat, but his eyes never left Daniel. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. The carriage seemed to hold its breath. Then the older man spoke, his voice calm, almost polite. "Daniel, you don't understand what you've stepped into. That notebook, it's not just her diary. It's evidence, dangerous evidence. And people are willing to kill for it." Daniel's throat went dry. "Where's Claire?" he asked, his voice cracking. The older man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Alive, for now. But that depends on you." A wave of relief and dread washed over Daniel. Claire was alive, but she was a hostage. The train screeched to a halt at the next station. The doors opened with a hiss. For a brief moment, commuters pushed in and out, unaware of the storm brewing in the middle of the carriage. Daniel knew this was his only chance. His fingers brushed over the notebook inside his jacket. He could hand it over, save himself, maybe even save Claire. But then he remembered the photographs in the warehouse, the endless surveillance, the way Claire wrote, "If this falls into the wrong hands, everything is lost." No, he couldn't trust them. As the doors began to close, Daniel made his move. He shoved the younger man with all his strength, darted past the crowd, and leapt out of the train just as the doors sealed shut behind him. "Daniel!" the older man's voice thundered from inside the carriage. But it was too late. The train lurched forward, carrying them away. Breathless, Daniel stumbled through the station, clutching the notebook like his life depended on it. Around him, life carried on as normal. People rushing to work, sipping coffee, scrolling their phones, completely unaware of the storm brewing in the middle of the carriage. Daniel knew he couldn't go home. He couldn't go to work. The men would find him anywhere. But he had something they wanted. Something worth everything. And somewhere out there, Claire was still alive, waiting to be found. Daniel looked down at the notebook, its worn leather cover almost pulsing in his hands. He opened it one last time and found a line he hadn't noticed before, scrawled in hurried handwriting on the back page. "Trust no one. If you're reading this, you're my only hope." Daniel closed the notebook, his jaw tightening. His old, ordinary life was gone. Now his story, and Claire's, was only just beginning. The end. Or is it?